Hi, I'm former Congressman Joe DioGuardi, the founder of the Albanian American Civic League, Liga Cittadina Shqiptare Americana, the only registered lobby for the Albanian people in Washington, D.C. Our work is not yet finished, but the future of the Albanian people is in your hands. Thank you. But unless we're prepared to take swift action, you will not see Mr. Milosevic back off.
What do you mean by swift action?
Well, we just had a congressional hearing, and I was delighted to see that a hearing that was called on Bosnia, and it was because, in great part of the efforts of our Albanian American Civic League, that we shifted the emphasis of that hearing to Kosova.
Further sanctions should be imposed in Belgrade. Is that going to work?
Sanctions don't seem to work with Mr. Milosevic. That's what the hearing was all about. We did get a very tough resolution. It was made even tougher because of the efforts of the Albanian American Civic League that represents the concerns of 400,000 ethnic Albanians here in America. But sanctions will not be enough. We need to show resolve.
Why hasn't Albania jumped in and helped their fellow Albanians? Go ahead.
On the way down, on my cellular phone, I received a call from one of our contacts in Albania, and as we're speaking, the Albanian parliament is meeting, and it's significant that I was told that the socialists are now joining with the opposition to mobilize the army, and they've ordered Fatos Nano, the prime minister, who, by the way, is vacationing in Greece, of all places, for the Albanians, and to get back to Tirana. So what I'm saying is that this could be our worst fears being confirmed, that this will now spread into a Balkan war, and that's why our foreign policy here is failing. Well, the only way to do it is what we did 3 years too late in Bosnia. We have to take the lead. We have to show Mr. Milosevic that there is pain he has to take for his actions. Sanctions will not work.
Do you have any faith in the United Nations' ability to monitor at least the situation in Kosovo or bring about some resolution?
The time for talking is over. Milosevic does not understand talk. He will lie his way through, as he did in Bosnia. All those acts that we saw against civilians, he blamed on the Bosnians, the so-called Muslims. He's doing the same now in Kosovo. He will not change his modus operandi. His goal is to have complete domination in this area. Even recently, those 8 young men in the bar in Peja that were killed, those were not Serbs. They were Montenegrins. And we believe they were killed by the Serbs in order to get the sympathy of the Montenegrins to jump into this war against the Albanians. How many years can you live under the control of a brutal dictator, with your families being killed, towns being destroyed, people being disappeared and tortured, until you say we now have to defend ourselves because we see the West is not willing to defend us?
Should Kosovar Albanians agree to anything of that kind, giving up weapons and hoping for the best for the future in March or at any other time?
I doubt that they will, because we have seen from experience that you cannot trust Slobodan Milosevic. He's a liar. He's a war criminal. He's an ultra-nationalist who's now breaking bread with Mr. Zyganov in Russia and Belarus. He's trying to create a new greater Serbia that goes way beyond the Balkans. How can we trust this man? Without U.S. troops as part of a NATO force in Kosovo, nothing can begin. We have let Mr. Milosevic get away literally with murder. Don't forget, this didn't start last year. It started in 1989 when he walked in with tremendous military force and brutality. And why we let this go for 10 years is beyond me, and why Mr. Holbrooke did not allow the Albanians to sit at the Dayton Accord so that we could deal with this issue of Kosovo at the time we settled Bosnia, which is not quite settled, as you know, is beyond me. And we represent the concerns and interests of 400,000 Albanian Americans. Imagine, we have in America 400,000 Albanians, and they are not far removed from what's going on there. that families are being killed, and we have a big interest in this. What you've heard is a total lie. This part of the Balkans, Kosova, was part of the state of Albania that came out of the Ottoman Empire on November the 28th, 1912. That's why you have so many Albanians there.
Albanians have been under a brutal occupation for 10 years in Kosova, and we all know what has happened for the past year. And it's a very welcome sign that we're finally saying in the international community that we're going to stop Slobodan Milosevic's genocidal war across Europe.
Right now, what we need to do is to take away this man's capability of hurting the thousands of people he's hurting right now. And that means to take away his military might. He doesn't deserve that kind of sophisticated weaponry. And we can take it out. The thing that we have to do is to get rid of Slobodan Milosevic. There will not be any peace in the Balkans.
We don't go after leaders of other countries.
Well, wait.
We're not the assassination.
He's already gave a speech in December where he told the intelligence community that Milosevic is much too expensive for us. We need to build a democratic opposition and get rid of him. One of the things that we should be considering right now is arming the Kosovo Liberation Army to defend those civilians. We did this in Bosnia. We armed the Croatian forces in Bosnia. It was that, along with the airstrikes, that brought Milosevic to the table. So we don't need to be talking about U.S. ground troops right now. We need to be talking about getting the weapons to the Kosovo Liberation Army, because we know this man by his deeds. We started this campaign. Now, NATO's 50th anniversary is coming up. We're about to go into the 21st century, and you want to shut this thing down, having lost?
Well, I think what we need to do is...
Is that the kind of America you want to see go into the 21st century?
We made a mistake getting...
We didn't make a mistake. Listen, this man's been planning since 1937. Here it is. He's got it written out what he wanted to do to the Albanians, page by page by page. Right. We should have known this. So this was not hidden.
We are going to continue this air campaign. It'll be intensified. We are going to move into a wider array of targets.
You know what they should bomb? They should bomb the information capacity of Mr. Milosevic, the lies from Tanjuk. They should drop a bomb on that TV station.
Well, you'd like to see that. Maybe eventually
Why not?
They will. Listen, I'm going to say
the lies are incredible.
I mean, why do we continue to speculate about Slobodan Milosevic? His patterns and practices are absolutely well established. So a trial will happen tomorrow, not surprising at all. We must pursue a policy that will finally bring this to an end. In my opinion, that means arming the KLA immediately and deploying the NATO ground troops.
And several countries will be stepping in to bring some of those refugees looking for a safe haven into their own domain.
Why didn't we know that not committing ground troops would allow Milosevic to clean out Kosovo? Why aren't we arming the Kosovo Liberation Army as we did the Croatians in the Bosnian War? I mean, is NATO so stupid that it would implement a strategy that would achieve the opposite of its announced goals? We cannot allow these refugees to leave the area. They will never return. History has shown us that. They must stay there, and every one of them must be returned to Kosovo. I am writing a letter today to President Clinton to let him know that we've made too many blunders already. Don't make this one. You'll be walking right into the trap that Milosevic has set. We didn't cause these problems. They were happening for 10 years. The Albanians have been subject to brutal oppression. But going back to Milosevic, the real crime over here is that we still want to make a place at the table for Slobodan Milosevic. His name should be on that list.
I agree.
His name was put on that list by the U.S. House of Representatives last June, and by the Senate. There's no question he's the one that's to blame.
We need to revisit.
And Holbrooke shouldn't be dignifying him. He shouldn't have put him at the table at Dayton as a partner in peace.
What
not the case.
What are we fighting for at this point?
Case.
I mean, he's declared a ceasefire in honor of Orthodox Easter.
A ceasefire.
And now,
yeah, he's pandering to the Orthodox Alliance
but, I mean,
in doing that and to world sympathy. Now, how can we be responding to someone who's overseeing mass extermination and mass expulsion and then raising the flag of religion? The problem that we face and that all Americans have to face is that we have a new Hitler in the heart of Europe who's been on a genocidal march across Europe, and we have to look at the kind of world that we're going to move into. And Mr. Milosevic has not finished after the mass expulsion and extermination of Albanians. He has every intention of moving into Montenegro. We're going to go into a wider war, losing more lives.
The worst thing that we're hearing is that we have almost 1 million refugees, displaced people in Kosova, and they may be starving. Isn't that a good enough reason now to get on with this thing and finish it?
I think it's a great reason.
Arm the Kosovo Liberation Army. We armed the Croats.
The question of Milosevic, can we deal with him as a head of state in the future?
Absolutely not.
But he's being dealt with as a head of state, not as a war criminal.
And Clinton is making the same error that Holbrooke made. Holbrooke made him our partner in peace at Dayton. He listened to Holbrooke. He listened to Milosevic when Milosevic says, don't bring the Albanians to the peace table at Dayton, and that's why we have the problem now. The man's a war criminal. He cannot be dealt with.
Okay, folks, hang in there as our Kosovo special continues.
You can't have a leader victimize the citizens of a state with state-sponsored terrorism, and then you're going to tell me this is a sovereign state, look the other way. And Clinton's made the right decision.
In fact, under international law, and this will become the defining issue, I believe, for the 21st century, you have lost
20
the
seconds
right
to wrap it up. Go
to
ahead.
have territorial integrity when you wage war against your own population to the point of genocide.
What's the end game here, and when is this going to end?
No, the end game should be to end this as soon as possible. To do that, we should be taking the advice from the seasoned generals. Apply the resources
The seasoned generals want ground troops,
Arm the
right?
KLA, get the ground troops in there, shut this thing down. We're going to have more accidents. It's going to cost a fortune. What are we doing stretching this thing out? This is genocide. Don't be bashful about using the word. You know, we list 9 generals, and we forgot to put Milosevic at the top of the list.
Didn't even include him.
We have to include him. He's the one that's running the show. Can you imagine a country that has a minister of information? Why do you need a minister of information? It's to sort out what you want the people to have, what you don't want them to have.
Do you think we can win this war without ground troops, and do you think the American people will stomach ground troops?
They have to, because we're in it. This is a NATO, excuse me, we've had now a commitment to NATO. We're part of NATO. We know that less than 15% of the troops will be American. I don't want to see one person die, but hundreds of thousands of people are in harm's way now. They're displaced within Kosova.
Bill Clinton
we don't want to go into
lead.
the 21st century with this on our record, that we didn't stand up to another Hitler. This man has one objective, and that's to stay in power. He's a Stalinist communist. He's the last vestige of that in Europe today, and that's why he walked into Kosovo in '89 to dominate it when the Kosovars wanted democracy, and they tried very hard to get it. And then he went to Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia. He wants to dominate everything, and we shouldn't take one promise he makes at its face value.
If we really want to resolve this conflict, then we're going to have to take other measures immediately. And to avoid the problem of ground troops right now, one of the things we could do is arm the Kosovo Liberation Army, which is actively working with NATO now, is cooperating. And they could do a lot of what has to happen on the ground, including saving the lives of the 700,000 Kosovars that Joe has mentioned that are trapped inside.
Of those people.
We have to arm the Kosovo Liberation Army. We did it to the Croatians in the Bosnian War 2 years too late after we lost 250,000, and we have to commit the ground troops. We can win this, and we have to win it. We cannot allow Mr. Milosevic to win 1% of this for what he's done.
The Serb leader is reportedly ready to make a deal, but only if he's allowed to save face.
We can't make any deal with Slobodan Milosevic. It's impossible. Anything we do with him will be a failure for the United States and NATO's credibility for years to come. The man's a war criminal. He's been declared as such by almost everybody, the U.S. Congress, the European Parliament. Why are we interested in doing something with him? Aren't we interested in long-term peace and stability in the Balkans? The right to self-determination is inalienable, but national sovereignty is not absolute, and he has lost the right to
What do you want to do about it? Do you want to kill him?
Listen, I don't mind that we should target where he lives, because that's where he strategizes. We went after Gaddafi. We went after Saddam Hussein. What are we waiting for? The only solution for Kosovo, I got to raise it right here, is independence. Here's our bumper sticker. We have a man now, after 10 years. We've called him a war criminal, but now he's been indicted. It's no longer rhetoric. He's an indicted war criminal. Why are we dealing with him? We have this man on the ropes. Why are we going to let him off the ropes?
You want to march in and arrest him?
Well, if we don't do it, I'll bet you the Albanians are going to do it. I think it's time we did the good Serbian people a big favor and removed Slobodan Milosevic. We have every right to do it. This is war. He's on the ropes. Let's go in there. We let Saddam Hussein off the hook. Let's not let Milosevic off the hook. What's this all about? It's to get the Albanians back to where they belong.
What makes you think they're all going to want to go back, be able to go back, and at what cost to the United States?
Well, that's the whole deal here. If you don't do the right thing, they won't go back. And if they don't go back, you're going to have a disaster.
How long should we be in there for? How many years do you want to stay?
As long as it takes to bring peace and stability to the Balkans.
2 generations.
Because if you don't do it, you'll have many more soldiers there in the future, and it'll cost us a fortune.
It's 50 years,
and that's why I wouldn't buy this deal. When people don't get information, or they get the wrong information, almost anybody can be elected. And here, the good Serbian people have been poisoned by a system that controls the media, just the way Hitler controlled the media in Nazi Germany, and you have now a war criminal running the country, and the ambassador's trying to sell us on the basis that he's democratically elected. That's nonsense. We're going to see indications of mass graves. We already know they're there. We've seen them from the air. That's why the court acted.
And
it wasn't easy for the court to act under these circumstances.
And perhaps we will see them as witnesses to also the refugees returning to their homes, which has been destroyed. And we will also probably have pictures of them returning to their homes and their towns for the first time, which are probably devastating.
But don't forget, that's what this is all about, to get the refugees back. Okay. They're not going to return until they know that NATO's in control and that all the Serbs are out. More than 70% do not trust Slobodan Milosevic, and 63% say, keep the bombing until we have this deal solidified. Milosevic has lost. That's why he's crying uncle. He's now an indicted war criminal. All the infrastructure in Serbia, bridges, electricity, trains, the military infrastructure, gone. He's got the worst reputation now in the world as a war criminal. The Serbian people have been brought down to their knees economically. Yes, the Albanians are out, but they must return, because we cannot allow this to stand in this century. Guess who put in between $1 billion and $2 billion in 1998 into the Trepčka mines?
Who?
A Greek holding company, Mytilineos.
So they're part of NATO.
Well, wait a minute. They're part of NATO, yes, but this also gave Greece, one of our NATO allies, a conflict. And I'd like to know, why did they do that at that time? Milosevic needed the money for the war. While we were talking at Rambouillet, Milosevic was marching 40,000 troops and tanks into Kosova. Here we're talking, President is claiming victory, and the Russians, for a whole day, nonstop, just keep going from Bosnia to Yugoslavia to Kosova. That's not by accident. We know that there are dozens of grave sites. Let the experts go in. They have not been able to go in. There have been no journalists in Kosova. There have been no experts in Kosova. Let's get the facts. But if you want to see why this happened, go back to our own U.S. State Department country reports from 1985. I testified in Congress as a congressman and afterwards, and used those examples. We never acted on it. But some of the most brutal violations of human rights were against the Albanian people by the Serbs, and they're recorded by our State Department. What about the Albanian prisoners that were taken illegally by Mr. Milosevic's troops as they were retreating from the Kosova jails into Serbia, more than 2,000 still languishing? I think the first thing that we have to see as a sign of his a positive attitude towards Western principles is a complete release immediately of these political prisoners. And what about war criminals? Mr. Milosevic is a war criminal, and so is Mr. Karadzic. These are his friends. Yugoslavia has disintegrated, and we ought to let the process continue. Slovenia has gone, Croatia has gone, Macedonia has gone, Bosnia-Herzegovina has gone.
But do you agree with Danielle that we shouldn't intervene? That's up to these folks to decide their business.
But we are right now, as the United Nations,
Yugoslavia is a country, and whether you like to admit it or not.
Yugoslavia is not recognized by the United Nations right now.
And a nation.
Yeah, but let me say this.
I know you wouldn't like it.
Any state that kills its own people, any state that kills its own people cannot be considered a state, and that's what they've been doing. Final thought is that I think democracy is in the air. Let's hope now that the Albanians can get what they deserve, which is self-determination, independence under international law.
As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Albanian American Civic League, I think we know that our job is not yet over. And so a strong diplomatic effort must go on in the press and the parliaments of the world. But it cannot go on without your support. It is our responsibility to resolve the Albanian national cause in our time.